Why super extra fancy? It has to do with... Oh, I can't reach it. Oh, shit. Oh. Alright, so this is it. Rice. It's the rice bag. US number 1 extra fancy. So I was inspired by these rice bags. Here's another one. Extra fancy rice bags. Extra fancy rice. And I thought, well, goddamn, if rice can be fancy, then surely I can be super extra fancy. But I was at Costco with my mom, actually. I was helping her out, and I was like, "Why the hell is the rice extra fancy?" And so I did some research into it, and it turns out there's 3 grades of rice that are suitable for consumption. There's also industrial grades for like agriculture and feed production and stuff. There's extra fancy rice, there's fancy rice, and then there's select rice. And so those are the grades of rice that the US, or the not USDA, FDA It is a bit of marketing lingo to get people to buy more rice. It's also a little it's a little misleading, and you find a lot of the food production industry uses misleading things. Like, for example, if you go to the store and you get grade A beef, you might think that grade A beef is the highest grade of beef on account of it's the first letter in the alphabet, but you would be wrong. I think that's like grade AAA, right? Is it? I think it's the same for eggs as well. And so, like, you know, if you went to the store and you saw select rice, you would think, well, surely that's the best kind of rice. And then it's not. And so the use of superlatives and triple superlatives and all that is a very fascinating sort of marketing wink. It's I don't know, it's not honest. I mean, it gets worse too. I did a bunch of research into the rice industry and, like, you know, and all this, but that's like an hour-long story. I don't think you guys want to hear about how brutal the rice industry is. Do I have a favorite painting or drawing that I've done? I do have a couple favorites, but I really try to do my favorite drawing every day. What I mean is that, like, my mentality is that if you're improving, then every day you should be producing your new favorite drawing. You see what I mean? And so every day my goal is to produce my favorite thing that I've drawn. Oh, you want to hear more on the rice wars? Okay. It's going to be a little hard for me to tell this story while I draw. But, so essentially, in the United States, rice was never a staple crop. Well, rice was never a staple crop for European consumption. So when the European powers came over here, you know, Native Americans did have rice, but they mainly were harvesting wild rice. And wild rice is not suitable for commercial agriculture. Essentially, the plant itself doesn't really support the methods that commercial agriculture usually installs. Now, what had happened was a lot of the slaves that were brought over from Africa, because in Africa, rice was a staple part of their diet, a lot of the slaves had the knowledge and the grains for producing large amounts of rice. What ended up happening was that the slaves would teach the plantation owners how to grow rice, and essentially the plantation owners used this, and the rice industry was started in the United States. In the United States today, there's only 4 states that produce rice: Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, and California. So, Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, historically, you would have had rice plantations there. So those would have been, similar to any other kind of plantation, just as brutal, just as horrible, but they were growing rice instead of cotton or coffee or whatever else they needed to grow. Now, California rice is particularly interesting, and that's what I chose to focus on, being as I'm from California. California has a unique climate to it, and so California grows sushi rice. Specifically, California grows Calrose rice. Calrose rice was a variety of rice that descended from a Japanese variety of rice. I believe it was called Blue Rose, that was the translation of the Japanese varietal that was cultivated in California, made specific to the climate, and then produced commercially here. Now, what had happened was rice in California. Well, okay, so I'll slow down for a second. Now, the reason I kind of got into researching this was that I had thought that rice was like a hugely detrimental crop. Essentially, rice production is incredibly water intensive, and I had assumed that because we're in a drought, we shouldn't be growing rice. And it turns out that is actually wrong. While rice is a water intensive crop, rice is actually grown on land that is almost infertile to any other thing. So what had happened is there's an area in the Sacramento Valley where the entire rice market in California resides. All of the rice in California is grown within a small area. And the reason for this was this land was originally, like, when the first settlers came over and discovered the Sacramento Valley, they went there and it was this barren, muddy wasteland. They couldn't grow anything there. And this happened to coincide with the gold rush. And so what had happened was the gold was drying up. There was a bunch of Chinese and Japanese immigrants that have come over, and they were essentially scammed. So they were sold the land in Sacramento by white settlers, saying that, look, this land is awesome, it's super fertile, you guys should create farms here. And then they went and showed up, and it turned out it was a desolate wasteland. But there were several Japanese farmers that figured it out, and they figured out how to cultivate rice, and they actually became immensely profitable. They flooded the mudlands, and what it is the reason things couldn't grow is because the clay layer, which is watertight, so you can't get any drainage through. Like, if there's a clay layer, no water can permeate down through it. And what happens is the clay layer, there's only like an inch of soil, and then it's clay. So trees and most plants can't get their roots down through the clay, and so they can't get established. Now, this is ideal for growing rice because to grow a rice paddy, you have to flood the field. So you'll flood it with about 6 inches of water, and you don't want to lose that water, right? If the water percolates down through the soil, then you're using too much water, it's highly expensive, and all that. So what the Japanese figured was that this was the perfect place to grow rice, and they became incredibly successful at growing rice in the Sacramento Valley. No, none of this is bullshit, bruh. This is all researched. You could audit me, dude. So they became incredibly successful in the Sacramento Valley. So much so to the point that in several newspapers, the rice market was written as the second gold rush. So the gold rush was coming to an end. Gold in California was starting to be kind of dried up. And now there was this huge rush for rice. The reason being was that there were so many Chinese immigrants in California that the demand for rice skyrocketed. So get this, on average, each person in China eats 1 pound of rice per day. And so they had a huge influx of Asian immigrants, and so the demand for rice rose. At the time, rice was the same price as gin and lamp oil. Just to put it in perspective, rice was very, very expensive. And so what happened was these Japanese farmers became incredibly rich off of growing rice in California. And to the detriment of all the white farmers, they were jealous, essentially. They got really jealous. And this is where it gets sad again. And this happened to coincide with the Japanese internment during World War II. So what happened in California was every Japanese person was rounded up and put into internment camps. And all the farmland of Japanese farmers was seized and taken over by white farmers, essentially. And to this day, there's only one rice farm in California that is still family-owned, Japanese family-owned, to this day, even though they created the entire California rice market. Now, so California produces an incredible amount of rice. Now, but the United States, in fact, if you eat sushi, like I'm sure all of you eat sushi, if you eat sushi, the rice that is in your sushi was grown in California. California produces the sushi rice for the entire country. Texas, Arkansas, and Mississippi produce what's called long grain rice. It's not as sticky. It doesn't clump together. And so if you eat sushi, then that rice was grown in the Sacramento Valley in California. So, but on the whole, the United States doesn't eat a lot of rice. So globally, the United States is the 12th leading producer of rice. However, this is where it gets weird. So the United States is number 12 in the production of rice globally, right? China obviously produces an insane amount of rice. India produces an insane amount of rice. But we're like 12th. However, and this is where it gets weird, we are number 1 in the export of rice. Now, if you had to guess, what's the number 1 country that we export rice to? Japan. Close. I mean, not close, but Mexico. Hey, that's actually right. So, Haiti is actually the number 1 country that we export rice to. Now, why would we export rice to Haiti? Well, this is another sad story. So, Haiti had a very flourishing rice market for a long time. They had sustainable rice farming, and their agricultural production in Haiti was dominated by rice production. The U.S. spends $1 billion annually to artificially decrease the cost of exporting rice. What that does is it makes it so that it's cheaper to buy American rice in Haiti than it is to grow their own rice. And so what we've done is the U.S. has essentially crippled Haiti's rice production. It forced their farmers to use improper farming techniques to lower their rice costs and keep up with U.S. import. And most of the fields in Haiti are now toxic because of improper farming practices. What's more is their diet has suffered because the Haitians, this rice was a staple part of their diet, and they can't keep up with it. And so their healthcare system is stressed, their food production system is stressed, their agricultural production system is stressed, and the U.S. has essentially crippled Haiti. And this is, one of a million other things the U.S. has done to cripple Haiti. Now, the other place the U.S. exports rice is Mexico, and we're in a similar trade war in Mexico right now as well. And essentially what we're doing is we're making it so that these countries can't be self-sufficient with their rice farming. And we're bullying these countries. And it's essentially we're in a trade war. And this is a common technique. In Panama, during the communism period, the U.S. government overthrew communist government by doing going into bananas. Just look up bananas and communism, and you'll see what we did. If you ever wonder why you can get bananas in for like 50 cents at your grocery store, it's the same thing. So this is a historical tactic used to overthrow governments, to cripple societies, to bankrupt countries. And essentially you force a country into being an import economy, and then you can force them into debt. Once they're in debt, you then control their land, you can control their government, and you control everything else within that country. Anyway, so that's the sad part. Haiti and Mexico, of course, are poorer countries, and so the U.S. can just kind of walk all over them. Now, California, on the other hand, we do not export our rice to Haiti. California produces high quality, fancy, super extra fancy sushi rice. And so most of California's rice actually goes to Japan. I think someone said that in the comments. So California rice, the number one importer of California rice is Japan. So now, but this is kind of curious. Going back all the way to World War II, why would Japan ever need to import California rice, right? Why would Japan need to import rice? Japan's been growing rice longer than the United States has been a country. Why the hell would they need to import rice? Well, it goes all the way back to World War II. After World War II, as part of the negotiation demands, the U.S. essentially forced Japan to start importing California rice. And for the last 60 years, the U.S. and Japan have been arguing about rice imports. In fact, the most recent was Obama got in a big argument with the country of Japan about forcing them to import California-grown rice. How do you force a country to import rice? Because this seems a little odd to me, right? Couldn't they just say, no, we don't want rice? Well, you force a country to import rice by going, hey, if you want wheat, if you want oil, if you want meat, then you have to fucking buy our rice as well. It's a package deal. You got to buy the rice. And so Barack Obama said, the negotiation was he was trying to get Japan to import 200,000 tons. No, I did research. This is off the top of my head. I'm drawing right now. This is me spitting facts. And so you got me sidetracked though. Where was I? Japan, rice, Obama. Okay, so Obama wanted Japan to import 200,000 tons of rice. Now, Obama negotiated with Obama, and they managed to get it down to 50,000 tons of rice annually. So Japan is being forced to import 50,000 tons of California-grown rice every year. In response, Japan has passed a decree in Japan that said rice is a part of our culture and a part of our history. So if you cannot make sushi, you cannot sell sushi in the country of Japan with California rice. So essentially Japan made it illegal to make sushi with import rice. You have to use Japanese grown rice to make sushi in Japan to call it sushi. And that they made that a rule. You see, the thing with Japan is Japan isn't Haiti. Japan isn't Mexico. Japan is it's a thriving world power, and they have the money to subsidize rice, just like the U.S. does. And so Japan is able to subsidize their own rice to make the rice market competitive for Japanese rice farmers. So as a big fuck you to the US government for forcing them to import rice, they said, well, if you're going to import rice, you're not allowed to make sushi with it. As a second fuck you to the US, Japan does two things with American rice. The main thing they do is they give it away as foreign aid. So when they have to go help another country, they just give away rice, and the rice they give away is California rice. The second thing they do with the rice, I'm almost done with the story. The second thing they do with the rice is actually they just feed it to their cows. They feed it to their pigs. And so part of the reason why Japanese beef and Japanese food, poultry and all that is so good is they take what is considered like the highest quality California rice and they feed it to their livestock. And I think that's badass. I think that's so badass. Because the United States is literally like trying to screw over countries with this. And anyway, so what's the takeaway here? Well, rice production is not bad. Growing rice is not bad. Eating rice is not bad. What is bad is the export of American rice. The export of American rice is currently harming numerous countries. And yeah, the takeaway is Japan is lit. That's a good takeaway too, is they know how to put up with US bullshit. It's not that the US is bad, it's that the international rice and the subsidization of rice exports. Now, when we hear subsidizing rice, a lot of times we think that subsidies go to the farmers who grow the rice, right? We think farmers get the subsidies. That's not how it works. Farmers sell the rice to a very small number. No, US is not bad. That is not the takeaway. Rice companies, rice farmers sell the rice to a very small group. It's like a monopolistic group, a very small group of rice exporters. The rice exporters are the ones who lobby governments and who do bad things with rice. And this small group of rice exporters is very secret. They're not well known. It's very scary. And so the growing of rice is not bad. The production of rice is not bad. It's the export of American grown rice products that is bad, and it's being used for evil stuff. Anyway, all right, let's do one more drawing and then I'm gonna call it a night. Sorry, man. I gotta calm down for a minute today. I'm doing good. Sorry, I told you that was a long story. What time is it? Let me calm down for a sec. I got really passionate. Did you guys hear patriotic music playing behind that speech? I nearly did. Okay, what are we doing? We're doing the last drawing of the night. Have some tea. You know what? You're right. That's the problem. I forgot to sip my tea. Cheers, everybody. Why does Japan import 39% of its rice from Thailand? I have no idea. It's probably not for sushi. Rice is also used, like the Elmer's glue in Japan is made with rice, for example. So there's a lot of industrial and agricultural purposes. They probably use it to feed their livestock and other stuff. I mean, I'll look it up. I'll look it up. I'm going deep into this. We're gonna find out about the rice market, man. Rice Gate. Bring down the big rice companies. No, it's rice exporters. Remember, rice growers are not the problem. In fact, growing rice is incredibly beneficial to the ecosystems around us. It's rice exporters. How many eyes would fit on an extra small? You can get like 3 on, any more than 3, and it starts getting like really crowded. Anyway, I'll write my little like rice manifesto here in a bit, and then we can all proceeds will go to shutting down rice exports in the U.S. and making sure that all American-grown rice stays in America. Oh, sorry, my roommates in the background are doing a thing real quick. You hear him? I'm just kidding. I live alone.